My name is Olivia Sterling. 3 weeks before my father's 55th birthday party, I found a photograph on the internet that I was not supposed to find. It was on the public Instagram account of a woman named Teresa Holt, who lives in a suburb of Denver, Colorado. The photo was 4 years old. In it, my father, the man who had walked me down the aisle 9 months earlier at my own wedding, was sitting on a sectional couch in a living room I had never seen in my life. He was holding a little girl in his lap. A boy was leaning against his shoulder. The caption said, "Daddy home for the weekend. Best day ever." My father was supposed to be in Cleveland that weekend for a sales conference. I had a voicemail he had left me from his hotel that Friday, asking how my honeymoon planning was going. I stared at that photo on my phone for about 3 minutes. Then I threw my phone across my kitchen. By the end of the next 6 weeks, I would discover that my father had been living two complete lives in two cities with two women for 15 years. By the end of the next 12 weeks, I would meet my half brother and half sister face to face for the first time. And by the end of 6 months, I would help engineer the destruction of the man who had raised me, working hand in hand with the other woman he had been lying to for just as long. This is the story of how I, Olivia Sterling, found out the truth about my father, and how Teresa Holt and I, two women who should have been enemies, became the most dangerous thing my father had ever faced in his life. Let me tell you about my family. I'm 26 years old. I work in marketing for a healthcare nonprofit in Boston. I got married last August to a man named Theo. We rent a small apartment in Somerville. We don't have kids yet. My father is Mark Sterling, 55 years old now, Regional Vice President of Sales for a midsize enterprise software company called NorthPath Technologies. He has been with the company for 22 years. For my entire adult life and most of my childhood, my father has traveled for work. 2 weeks home, 2 weeks on the road. It was a rhythm. It was who he was. My mother is Janet Sterling, 53. She teaches third grade at the same elementary school she has worked at for 19 years. She is the kindest person you will ever meet. She is the person who showed up at every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference, every school play. She remembered every birthday. She wrote handwritten notes for every wedding. She still bakes cookies for the neighbors at Christmas. She has been married to my father for 28 years. My younger sister is Hannah Sterling. 23, she just graduated from the University of Vermont with a degree in environmental science. She is the family golden child, the one who hugged hardest, who texted dad every morning, who FaceTimed him from her dorm room on Tuesdays. I love my sister. I want to be very clear about that. We grew up, Hannah and me, believing we had a good father. He came home for soccer tournaments. He came home for graduations. He paid for things. He was warm. He was funny. He sent us long birthday emails every year. He cried at my wedding. I have a photograph of it on my fridge of him in his tuxedo, wiping his eyes during my first dance. He cried at the wedding. He had a second family. I want you to sit with that for a second. He stood in a tuxedo at the front of a church and walked me down the aisle and put my hand into Theo's hand and watched me say, "My vows." And the entire time, there was a 12-year-old boy in Denver who called him dad, and an 8-year-old girl in Denver who called him dad, and a 40-year-old woman in Denver who at that exact moment thought my father was at his elderly mother's funeral. That was the cover story he had used for my wedding. He told Teresa his mother had died. His mother, my grandmother Eileen, was, at that moment, sitting in the second pew at the church, watching her son walk her granddaughter down the aisle. She is still alive today. She is 81. She has no idea any of this happened. I am going to tell you exactly how I found out. It started, of all places, with a birthday party I was planning for him. My father's 55th birthday was coming up in April. My mother had decided, 6 months in advance, that she wanted to throw him a big one. A surprise party, 40 people, the house, dinner catered. She gave me the project to plan. I said yes immediately. I loved my father at that point. I want you to remember that. I loved my father. I was excited to plan something special for him. I started the way you start any modern party, by going through every social media account he had ever used: LinkedIn, Facebook, and old Instagram he barely posted on. I wanted to find old friends, old coworkers, old classmates, people he had lost touch with that we could invite as a surprise. LinkedIn was useful. Facebook was useful. I was on his Facebook through his account because he had given me his password 10 years earlier so I could help him with the computer stuff for about an hour one Saturday afternoon when I noticed something small. There was an old photo from 2019 in his timeline, a photo of him alone, standing in front of a stone fireplace in a house I did not recognize. He was holding a beer. He was smiling at someone off camera. The caption said, "Best weekend and nothing else." I did not recognize the room. I did not recognize the chair behind him. I did not recognize the small artwork hanging on the wall. And this is the part that mattered. The photo had been tagged with a person whose name had since been removed. You could see the empty placeholder where the tag used to be. I screenshot the photo. I ran a reverse image search. 20 seconds later, I was looking at the public Instagram account of a woman named Teresa Holt. Her Instagram was sparse. Maybe 40 photos over 5 years. She was 40 years old. Pretty. Brown hair, lived in Denver. The third photo down was a copy of the same photo, but the wide shot. My father in front of the fireplace holding a beer, smiling, but in this version, there was a hand on his waist, a woman's hand, Teresa's hand. The caption said, "My everything, home for the weekend." Correct. The date was March 17th, 2019. I knew exactly where my father had told me he was on March 17th, 2019. He had been in Cleveland at a sales conference. He had left me a voicemail that Friday. I had it saved because he had wished me a happy belated birthday, asking how Theo and I were doing. I scrolled down on Teresa's Instagram. I scrolled and I scrolled and I scrolled. There were photos going back 5 years. My father at a Halloween party with 2 children in costume. My father at what looked like a graduation, holding a sign that said, "Caleb, first grade." My father at a beach in matching family photo. Teresa, 2 kids. My father, all in white shirts and jeans. My father holding a newborn baby girl. That girl's hospital wristband with my father's name on it in the next photo. I threw my phone across the kitchen. It hit the wall. It cracked. I did not care. I sat down on the kitchen floor. I tried to do the math. The boy, Caleb, was 12. The girl, Sophie, was 8. That meant the affair was, at minimum, 13 years old, which meant my father had started this with Teresa when I was 13, which meant my entire teenage life. Every father daughter dance, every college tour, every time I had cried on his shoulder about a breakup, every time I had thanked him for being the best dad, had been happening alongside a second family that I knew nothing about. I sat on my kitchen floor for an hour. I did not call my husband. I did not call my sister. I did not call my mother. I knew, sitting on that floor, that I was the only one in my family who knew, and I knew I was not going to tell anyone, not yet, until I knew everything. I want to explain something about how I think. I am a marketing professional. I research things for a living. I have a graduate certificate in data analysis. I know how to find information on the internet, and I know how to verify it. For the next 3 weeks, I built a file. Here's what I did. First, I went to an old shared family iPad that had been sitting in a drawer at my mother's house since 2018. My father had used it during the years he was first getting comfortable with technology. He had never wiped it. It was still signed into one of his old Apple IDs. I drove home one weekend and I told my mother I needed to borrow it for the party planning. She handed it to me without a second thought. I took it back to Boston. On that iPad, I found a synced email account I had never seen before. Mark.r.sterling@protonmail.com. Not his work email, not his personal Gmail. That email had 11 years of correspondence with Teresa Holt. I read it for 3 days. I read about anniversaries. I read about Caleb's birth. I read about Sophie's birth. I read about my father telling Teresa he was trapped in a long widowhood, his exact phrase, and that his late wife's family would never let him truly move on. He had told Teresa my mother was dead. He had told Teresa he had 2 grown daughters from his first marriage, Olivia and Hannah, who he had a complicated relationship with, but who he sometimes visited on the East Coast. He had built an entire fictional history for Teresa, in which my mother had died of cancer in 2008, and he was a sad single father trying to find love again. Second, I found financial records. There was a separate American Express card he had been using for 15 years. Statements went to the Denver address. I dug through his old shared family Dropbox, which he hadn't touched in 6 years, but which still had read access from my email, and I found his tax returns from 2017 and 2018, which had been filed jointly with my mother. He had been carefully writing off business expenses that I now realized were Denver expenses: hotels, rental cars, restaurant bills. But the most damning record, and this is what made the case impossible for him to escape, was a life insurance policy I found in a financial planning document he had emailed himself in 2021. A $300,000 life insurance policy with Teresa Holt listed as the primary beneficiary. In his retirement planning spreadsheet, my father had also set up an irrevocable trust for Caleb and Sophie, funded with $210,000 from a brokerage account my mother had no idea existed. Third, I called my own attorney. Quietly, I asked her without giving names what the legal exposure looked like if I had a hypothetical scenario in which a married man had been financially supporting an undisclosed parallel relationship for 15 years with joint marital assets. She told me very calmly that it would be one of the most aggressive divorce cases she had ever seen in her career. She told me to come in. I came in. I retained her on a Wednesday. I went home that night to my husband and told him everything. Theo listened for 2 hours. When I was done, he said three things. He said, I am here. He said, you are going to be okay. He said, what do you want to do? I told him that before I told my mother, before I told my sister, before I confronted my father, I wanted to talk to Teresa. I wanted to know if she was a partner in the lie or if she was a victim of it. I want to be clear, I did not go into that phone call wanting to be kind to Teresa Holt. She was, in my mind, the woman who had broken my family, the woman who had 2 children with my father, the woman who had taken 15 years of him from us. She might have known. She might have been the architect. I had to know. I found her phone number in my father's Proton mail. He had texted it to her in 2016. I dialed it on a burner number I had bought for the occasion. She picked up on the third ring. I said, is this Teresa Holt? She said, yes. Who is this? I said, my name is Olivia Sterling. I'm Mark Sterling's daughter, his real daughter, from his real family in Massachusetts, where he has been married for 28 years to a woman named Janet, who is not dead, and who is at this moment teaching 3rd grade at the elementary school she's worked at for 19 years. There was silence on the line. It lasted maybe 10 seconds. It was the longest 10 seconds of my life. And then I heard a sound I will never forget for as long as I live. It was a woman making the noise that humans make when their world ends. It was the noise of someone realizing that 15 years of their life, every photograph, every anniversary, every birthday, every quiet evening in their living room, every funeral they thought they had attended with their partner, was constructed on top of something they hadn't known was there. She started crying. She kept crying. I waited. After about 5 minutes, she said, I'm going to need you to call me back. I need to put my children to bed. I need to think. I need an hour. Will you call me back in an hour? I said yes. I called her back exactly 1 hour later. She was calmer. She told me everything. She had met my father in 2009 at a hotel bar in Denver after one of his conferences. He had told her that very first night that his wife had died of cancer the year before, that he had 2 adult daughters he barely saw, that he was a sad man who came to Denver every other week for work and didn't know how to be a person anymore. She had felt sorry for him. They had started dating slowly. In 2011, he had asked her to be exclusive. In 2013, they had moved in together, into the house she now owned, the one in the photo, the one I had seen on Instagram. In 2014, she had given birth to Caleb. In 2018, to Sophie. He had told her every time she asked about marriage, and she had asked many times, that he was emotionally not ready to remarry because of the loss of his late wife. She had given him grace for 15 years. She had thought he was a broken man. She had thought she was healing him. She had told her children that Daddy works in Boston half the month. She had been telling Caleb that Daddy's first wife is in heaven with the angels since Caleb was old enough to ask. She was a victim, maybe even a bigger victim than me, because she had built a family, a real, full, 2 children family on top of a fairy tale my father had invented inside the lobby of a hotel in 2009. I asked her one question near the end of that second call. I said, what do you want to do? Teresa Holt, a woman I had been ready to hate 90 minutes earlier, said, Olivia, I want to help you destroy him. Tell me what you need. Over the next 3 weeks, Teresa Holt and I built the cleanest, most thorough family fraud case any attorney in this country has ever seen. Teresa had things I didn't have. She had a 15-year photo archive, thousands of photos of my father with her, with the kids in their house. She had emails, texts, greeting cards. She had a lease in his name on the house they lived in for the first 6 years. She had a journal. She had kept a journal of every conversation they had ever had about the dead wife. What he had said, her name was Susan. He had said my mother's name was Susan Sterling. He had invented a fake dead Susan Sterling. She had bank records from a joint account they had maintained for 6 years. She had, and this is the moment that broke her, even more than the original revelation, found a series of greeting cards she had kept in a shoebox. Anniversary cards, cards from my father. To my love, my second chance, my Teresa. All of them signed. She had photographic evidence of 15 years of my father's life that I had not seen. I had what she didn't have. I had access to the marital assets, the joint bank accounts, the joint property, the joint retirement portfolio, the family home he had been quietly bleeding money out of for 15 years. I had my own legal counsel, Patricia, a divorce attorney with a reputation for being the most aggressive woman in family law in New England. I had the NorthPath Technologies Code of Conduct, which I had quietly pulled from his company's investor website, a document that made it absolutely clear that executives who engage in financial fraud, including misuse of company expense accounts for personal benefit, could be terminated for cause and stripped of all unvested stock options. My father had been using company expense accounts to fly to Denver for 15 years. I had everything I needed. We picked the date. It was 3 days before his 55th birthday party. The birthday party, the one I had been planning, was going to happen. It was just not going to be the party he was expecting. I am going to tell you exactly what happened on the day of my father's 55th birthday. My mother had spent 4 months preparing. 40 people, the house, a caterer she had hired, a photographer, a custom cake, 3 layers with 55 on top in gold leaf that she had ordered 6 weeks in advance. My father knew none of it. He thought he was coming home from a sales meeting in Atlanta. He had told Teresa he was at his mother's 75th birthday, even though, again, his actual mother is 81 and has not had a 75th birthday in 6 years. He landed at Logan at 4:15 p.m. He took a car service to the house. He walked through the front door at 5:50 p.m., expecting nothing. 40 people jumped out and yelled, "Surprise!" He laughed. He hugged my mother. He kissed her on the cheek. He let her bring him a drink. For 90 minutes, he was the king of the room. He told stories. He laughed at people's jokes. He thanked his coworkers. He hugged his old college friend who had flown in from Chicago. He cried, actually cried, when his 81-year-old mother gave a speech about how proud she was of him. At 7:30 p.m., my mother stood up and tapped a glass. She said, "Before we cut the cake, I want to let Olivia say something. She's been planning this for months." I stood up. I had been wearing a small earpiece all evening. Teresa was already in a car outside my parents' house. She had been there for an hour. I tapped my wine glass. The room turned. I looked at my father. I said, and I am going to give you my exact words because I have replayed them in my head every single day since. "Dad, I want to say happy birthday. I love you. Mom loves you. Hannah loves you. So do a lot of the people in this room. And in the spirit of love and family, I want to introduce some people you haven't seen in a while. They've been waiting outside. I think it's time to let them in." My father went pale. I turned to my husband. Theo opened the front door. Teresa Holt walked in. She was wearing a black dress. She was holding the hand of a 12-year-old boy with my father's exact jawline. She was holding the hand of an 8-year-old girl with my father's exact eyes. The room did not understand at first. My mother understood immediately. She did not scream. She did not cry. She stood up. She set her wine glass down. She walked across the living room. She stopped in front of Teresa Holt. And she said, clearly, firmly, in front of 40 people, "You must be Teresa. I'm Janet. The wife he told you was dead." The room exploded into the kind of silence I had only ever read about in books. My father started to say something. My mother turned to him. She said, and this is the only sentence she said to him that night, "Mark, you are not welcome in this house. Get out." He stood up. He looked at his mother, my grandmother, who was staring at him from across the room with an expression I had never seen on a grandmother's face. He looked at his sister. He looked at his coworker who had flown in from Chicago. He looked at me. He walked out the front door. He has not been allowed back in that house since. Patricia, not my attorney, filed for divorce 2 days later. The case was, as she had warned, one of the most aggressive she had ever filed. We had everything: documentation of 15 years of marital fraud, evidence that he had used joint funds to support a parallel family. evidence that he had used company resources under specific terms of his employment agreement to facilitate the fraud. By the end of week 1, NorthPath Technologies had quietly placed my father on administrative leave. By the end of week 3, they had fired him for cause and clawed back 6 years of unvested stock options. By the end of month 2, the divorce was being negotiated under terms my father could not contest. My mother got the house. My mother got 2/3 of the retirement portfolio. My mother got the brokerage account he had hidden, including the funds he had been moving to the trust for Caleb and Sophie. Teresa, and this is the part I am most proud of, was not left out. Teresa filed a separate civil case in Colorado with documentation of 15 years of consortium fraud. She did not get rich, but she got enough that her 2 children's college funds were preserved out of the original brokerage assets. The settlements were coordinated. My mother and Teresa met in person 4 months after the party. They met for coffee in a hotel lobby in Denver. I do not know everything that was said in that conversation. I know from my mother that there were no fights, there were no recriminations, there was no anger between them. They were 2 women who had been lied to by the same man, and they were the only 2 people in the world who fully understood what each of them had been through. They are not friends, but they are something else. They are something I do not have a word for. My father, Mark Sterling, lives in a 1-bedroom apartment outside Boston now. He could not get back into the industry he had spent 22 years in. The fraud termination at NorthPath was reported through industry channels. He works, the last I heard, as an outside sales rep for a small office supply company. He makes a fraction of what he used to make. He has not been allowed contact with Caleb and Sophie. They are not legally his children. Teresa was never married to him, and after everything, she has decided they do not need him in their lives. She tells them, when they ask, that Daddy made some choices that mean he can't be in our family anymore. He has not been allowed contact with Hannah and me. My sister, who of all of us took it hardest, has not spoken to him in 18 months. Hannah has needed therapy. She is still in therapy. She will be in therapy for a long time. He sends me emails sometimes. I delete them. My mother is 60 years old now. She still teaches 3rd grade. She is dating, very quietly, a man who runs a hardware store in our town. He's a good man. He is kind. He has no secrets we have found, and we have looked carefully. My grandmother Eileen, my father's mother, does not speak to him anymore. She told us at Christmas last year that she had raised him to be better than that. Teresa and I text once a month. I have met Caleb twice. I have met Sophie once. They are my half-brother and my half-sister. I did not ask for them. I did not choose them. But they are children, and they did not choose this either. We are still figuring out what we are to each other, but we are figuring it out together. I'm sure you're not just your. Enough. I want to leave you with one thing before I end this video. My father thought he could live 2 lives because he believed neither half of his family would ever talk to each other. He believed in walls. He believed in distance. He believed that the women in his life, my mother, Teresa, and me, were 3 different versions of the same kind of person. Someone who would never know. Someone who would never look. Someone who, if she did find out, would crumble. He was wrong about all of us. When the wall came down, and it came down on a Tuesday in March in a kitchen in Somerville with a phone hitting a wall, the women he had been counting on became the smartest, most organized, most coordinated group of people he had ever met in his life. My name is Olivia Sterling. I am his real daughter. And this is what happens when a quiet woman finds the photograph she was not supposed to find. If this story moved you, if you've ever discovered something about a family member that changed everything you thought you knew, hit that subscribe button. We post a new story like this every single day. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done after that phone call with Teresa? Would you have worked with her, or would you have hung up? I read every single comment. I'll see you tomorrow.